All right, it is 6 o'clock, and I will call this meeting of the Lunenburg Town Council to order. Before beginning, I'd like to acknowledge that we're in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And with that, I'd look to a motion to approve our agenda. Moved by Councillor Sanford, seconded by Councillor Birtles. Any additions or deletions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Takes us on to the approval of the May 25th council meeting minutes. Is there a mover to approve those minutes as circulated? Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Birtles. Any errors or omissions to note? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. There are no public hearings or presentations. And there was correspondence between the town and the Minister of Justice related to accessibility. And there are two requests for proclamations. The first one is 6B, proclamation for recognition of the longest day of smiles, June 20th. Is it anyone's pleasure to move the draft motion there as presented? Councillor Ernst, seconded by Councillor Duggan. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Then there is a proclamation request for recognition of Recreation and Parks Month in June 2021. Is it anybody's pleasure to move that draft motion as presented? Moved by Councillor Sanford, seconded by Councillor Halverson. Any discussion or debate on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Unfinished business, 7A, a presentation from the Property Valuation Services Corporation. So I will turn the floor over to Shannon Peterson, who is joining us from PVSC.
Hi there. I have two other folks in the audience with me, so I'm just going to do a quick check to see. Paul, are you there? Can you turn on your mic? I think he might be streaming the live stream, so I may have.
I'm just moving him over. Thank you.
Great. And Heather, can you just make me a presenter so I can share my screen?
Yeah, you are. You should be able to.
I should be unmuted. I just want to get my video going. Shannon?
Excellent.
Can you hear me okay?
I can.
All right.
And everyone can see my presentation here. Perfect. All right, so thank you for having us. And we have about 25 minutes worth of material to share with you tonight. Quite a bit of technical stuff, a little bit of background, but we've been doing a little roadshow, we're calling them, visiting all municipalities, especially as there's quite a few faces around the table or the Zoom call, if that's how we're doing them these days. So it's nice to see everybody. So my name is Shannon Peterson, and I'm the Policy and Stakeholder Relations Advisor. I've been with PVSC for 12 years, and I oversee our municipal activities across the province. And I'll leave it to Paul to introduce himself.
Well, thank you, Shannon, and thank you, Your Worship and Council, as well as CAO. Privileged to be here tonight. I've been with PVSC for the past 5 years. Just for your own information, I do have some elected municipal official experience in the past with the town of Windsor, and there are a couple of faces here that seem familiar to me. So thanks. Go ahead, Shannon.
Okay, and we do have listening in tonight as well. We won't worry about the technology to bring them up, but we have our local assessor, Rod Tremblay, who actually lives close to the area as well. So he's sitting in to hear our presentation tonight. And sure, here we go. So very quickly, we'll go over an introduction to PVSC, to walk you through the assessment process, hopefully not too repetitive for some of you, and you learned something new tonight. We always include a piece on the CAP program, as it tends to be a topic that is conversed quite a bit. So we like to give an update there. And then I'll hand it over to Paul, and he'll take you through the assessment role, and in particular, the town's assessment profile. So Property Valuation Services Corporation, or PVSC, we are an independent not-for-profit organization. We have a board of directors that's primarily municipally made up of municipal administrative and elected officials. We also do have the CEO of the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities, as well as some independent members that sit on our board. We were created in 2007 by the PVSC Act. Prior to that, we were an arm of Service Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations at the time. In 2001, the cost of assessment moved from the province to municipalities, and then the move to take us out of government happened shortly after that, and we became independent. And the Nova Scotia Assessment Act is the legislation that we follow on how to assess property. So we always start this presentation by going through just really high level what we do and what we don't do. I think to many property owners, they see us as one group. So we do like to show where we can speak to and where we can't. So we deliver the assessment role. There's 49 municipalities across the province, and by the legislation, we do that before December 31st of each year. In that is also 630,000 notices that go to property owners the following January. And as I said, we administer the capped assessment program for eligible properties in Nova Scotia. What we don't do is set the rates, the tax rates, collect those taxes. We administer the cap, but we don't create tax policy, and we don't provide tax relief. So we do get asked quite a few questions on the right-hand side of the screen, and we always go back to, well, what can we speak to on the left-hand side, and make sure that our partners on the right that can speak to those take care of the topics that are theirs to do. And before I get into assessment, there are many other things that we do as well, in addition to the assessment role. We send weekly, monthly, quarterly reports to the municipalities. That includes everything from sales information, ownership changes, address information, adjustments that happen under appeal. If properties become exempt or become taxable, we make those changes. So that all comes through on a very frequent basis for your administration to be able to update those tax accounts. We have the notices. I already spoke about the cap. In addition to the cap, there's a second program that we administer as well, and that's the Seasonal Tourist Business Designation Program, and that's also a provincial program. It's application-based, and it gives property owners whose businesses are seasonal and shut down for the winter months a relief on the tax side. So we administer those applications as well. And then we have, on this infographic that I have here on the right, there's 4 services in addition to the assessment function that we have. We share permit information with municipalities. So we collect all of the building inspector details and we get those permits electronically. It's significant help to us understanding when an inspector has been here and what a building inspector has collected, because we also do inspections as well. We also share address information through an addressing portal. I think many property owners expect if I update my address at one, it's updated in both. And that's not the case, but through the shared initiative, it is. So that started about 10 years ago. And we almost have 100% of the accounts on the initiative, which is really exciting for us. Data Zone, that's our portal on our website that provides open data to anybody who wants to consume raw assessment data. And then e-delivery service is the ability to get the assessment notice, and then for municipalities that participate, a copy of tax bills through e-post. That is dissolving. Canada Post is retiring the e-post service. So at this point, we're just trying to figure out where do we go from here with that one. But those are 4 services that we offer in addition to the assessment function. So shifting gears into the technical side, I had said the Nova Scotia Assessment Act is the legislation that we follow. It outlines how we assess property, how we classify property, what's commercial, what's residential. But the most important definition for us, and you can find definitions of market value, mortgage companies look at market value, insurance adjusters look at market value, appraisers, But for us, for assessment purposes, it's the amount in which, in the opinion of the assessor, would be paid if it were sold on a date prescribed by the director, that's the director of assessment, in the open market by a willing seller to a willing buyer. And I'll get into, in the opinion of the assessor, and those dates in my next couple slides. But for us, it's a very specific definition for our business, and it's really important that it's described the way that it is. So just to give you some highlights around how all the work that goes into getting to that assessment role. In January, like I said, we mail over 600,000 assessment notices. This year, that was January 11th, which was day one of the 31-day appeal and inquiry period. You can call anytime throughout the year and talk to an assessor to review your property, but you only have 31 days to appeal it, which is really important that we have all of our assessors and our internal call center on the phones ready to go and meeting the needs of those property owners. We usually get around 6,000 to 7,000 appeals. This year, about half of them came through email, which was really nice to see. And we're hoping that that trend continues, especially in this world that we're in right now. The ability to email in information is quite important. In February, as soon as that appeal period ends, we start calling property owners to discuss their grounds for appeal. We also mail income and expense forms to commercial property owners. So when we think about market value, if you own an apartment building, you're buying that apartment building, or the worth of that apartment building includes the rents of the property, not just, is it brick, is it stucco, how is it constructed? So we need that income information to help us set the market values for those properties. And so we mail those questionnaires in February. In March, we have a deadline that we have to have all of our sales reviewed for the upcoming assessment year so that we're able to establish what should happen in the year to come. And then the orange bubble, May, that takes us through the rest of the summer. And that's where we are right now, is looking at all of those sales that we collected for market value purposes to decide what needs to change for next year and what are those sales telling us. Then we roll into September, and we also inspect permits all year as well. But if we're adding construction to the assessment role, we want the most complete construction on those accounts. So we tend to save the bulk of our permits up into the fall so we can get as accurate a picture of where that property is at the time that we visit it. In October, we have a program with commercial property owners where we do consultation. Years past, those that have been here, say 6 years ago, we used to see a lot of commercial adjustment under appeal on things that we could have prevented had we had additional information in the fall. So they tore down a building, the information had changed since their questionnaire was filled out, things like that. So we do a lot of proactive outreach in October to collect information from commercial property owners and tax agents to help avoid some of those appeals that maybe weren't necessary to file in January. And then when December rolls around, we finalize the assessment roll, we send that to you, and then we get ready to mail those notices and we start all over again. So for the upcoming assessment roll, and I know this is of interest to everybody with the market that we're all in right now, on January 1st, or in January of 2022, we will mail every property owner a new assessment notice. The value of that property is what we, in the opinion of the assessor, feel that the property is worth as of January 1st, 2021. To set that value and get that information, we look at sales 1 year prior to January 2021. So sales that occur all throughout the pandemic last year, that's our basis for our analysis going into this upcoming assessment roll. It also includes the physical construction that's happening right now. So it's the physical state of the property as of, and I apologize, I should say 2021, but it's the physical state of the property as of December 1st and market value from 1 year prior. So that will be what is delivered on your December assessment roll and what's on the January assessment notice for property owners. So in that, we collect data from a variety, or what goes into market value. So we look at the type of the property, the size, where is it? Is it on the water? Does it have acreage? Is it a farm? The style of the building, townhouse, single family home, apartment building. Is it brick or is it some other type of construction? And how old is it? Is it brand new or is it something from 50 years ago that needs renovation? And all of that factors into market value. So when we get those sales, we look at it to say, was this sold in the open market? Was it a willing buyer and was it a willing seller? If all of those are yes, then we'll factor that into our analysis and that will tell us where we need to go for next year. And of course, we can't visit 630,000 properties across the province every year, so we have to do it en masse. And I have a definition here. Mass appraisal is the process of valuing a group of properties. So using a given date. So as we said, January 1st, that's our given date. We use common data. So all of those data elements in that graphic we look at to say, are we comparing the same information? And then we test that to see how should we move this neighborhood? Is it fair to say all of these properties would sell for 2% higher than they sold last year? And if that's the case, then we move that grouping together. You'll see the same effect if they're going down as well. And if some properties stick out and are transacting differently than others, then we can separate those and treat, as long as we're treating properties that have common data elements that fit that test the same. That's how we move it. And we need a full year of sales data to be able to do that. So the further you move out from the more dense areas that have transactions that are occurring more often, it becomes challenging to have enough sales information to make a decision to move a grouping of properties. So we have criteria around how many sales we require to move certain things. And a full year we find gives us enough data to be able to make those decisions. And then my second last slide is just some of the areas that we get data from. So we're talking with property owners every day. We get a nightly feed from the land registry. We look at, we're scouring real estate websites as well as getting that information. Building permits, we spoke about that, the income and expense information. We get costing information updated annually as well from an international costing organization. So as you also know, the price of 2x4 is quite high right now. So we'll get updated information from them on how much does it cost to build right now. This is a picture here of the aerial photography that we use. We contract a company to fly areas of the province every year. We do have imagery for every municipality and we refly it on the high activity areas. And we share that information back through our website with municipalities as well. And we have boots on the ground continuously visiting properties. So my last slide is just before I hand it over to Paul, just to take you through the CAP program, how that program works. So it is legislation, Section 45A of the Assessment Act. We administer it on behalf of the provincial government. Essentially, how it works is if you have an eligible property, you don't have to apply. We have a set of criteria that we measure against the properties to see whether or not they're eligible. But if the property is eligible, you'll have an assessment, a market value assessment, and you'll have a capped assessment. And your market value will move based on what we feel the market value of the property is. The cap will move based on CPI for that given year, and we pull that number in November. And so if your assessment is going up 2% and CPI is staying, as you could see, this year it was 0.3, the amount that you're taxed on will go up by 0.3%. If your assessment goes down and CPI is still going up, the amount that you're taxed on will still go up. If your taxable amount ever goes above your market value because CPI keeps increasing and say you were staying the same or you saw a reduction, your cap will come off and you get taxed on your market value. So it has to be a residential property. It has to be owned by the owner has to be in Nova Scotia at least 50% of the year. So many snowbirds, they are eligible as long as they are here for 183 days. We use mailing address for that. If the property sells, it comes out of cap unless it stays within the family. So the cap will remain for family to family sales. Like I said, has to be a residential and less than 4 dwelling units. And then 1 year after the property sells, we'll look at that market value to say, were there physical changes to that property that we learned through the sale that we didn't have? Say they renovated their kitchen, maybe there was a shed that was added, some improvements to a deck. We'll add that information. We'll establish a new market value for the property. And then the cap will go back on if the property becomes eligible going forward. And that's it for me. Paul, if you want to take it over from here.
Sure. Can you hear me okay there? I assume the silence is okay. I see a couple of nods. So anyways, Shannon mentioned some pretty key dates, but I want to recognize one before I go on so I don't forget. I want to wish Town Lunenburg a happy 268th birthday. Congratulations. And what you see before you are some of the assessment numbers for the province of Nova Scotia. They're, you know, quite frankly, they're big numbers. A lot of it's driven by HRM. They are certainly probably about 50% overall, give or take, of the values that we look at here. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this one. You can see in the right-hand box at the top, the green area is the residential assessed value for the province was up 3.59%. I'm going to bring that down to your local level here on the next slide, but you'll see the difference between the 89.9 billion and then the 82.5 billion with the cap. Shannon had spoke about the 0.3% increase in CPI. Well, if the market value is going up more than 0.3% and the cap's going up by 0.3%, then there's going to be a difference between the cap and the market value. So that's essentially the cap impact there as far as the assessed value versus the cap value, the market assessed value versus the capped assessed value. You'll see that numbers such as in the bottom left, 41,000 sales. We look at all those sales. Those numbers of sales are up a little bit. As you can appreciate, there's been quite a bit of activity in the markets this past year, and it's still relatively hot. So that's a little better, a little more than average of what we would look at every year. And we do a lot of permits and inquiries. So from that, I think, Shannon, we can move on to the next slide. So let's take a look at the town of Lunenburg. You have 1,397 total accounts in the town, representing $370 million worth of assessment. You'll see in those sales numbers, there were 54 sales last year. That's a little higher than average. Activity has been pretty high in the town. It would typically average around 30, maybe 35 over the past, in a regular year. The last couple of years, it's been pretty vibrant, I'll put it that way. We've had 36 appeals, which is pretty much on par with averages 30, 35 around there as well. So not really a whole lot of difference this year in the appeals. The assessment in the green box, 268 million, that was up 5.35%. You compare that to last year, it was up a little more. Last year was at, I believe it was I've got it here somewhere. Last year was 3.24%. This year it's 5.35%. So a little indication of the market values going up the last couple of years. Compare that to the province, which was around 3.5%, I think it was. You can see that there are pockets that are doing quite well, that are sort of outgrowing or have higher values than what provincial average is. But HRM, down in Lunenburg, are ones that are higher than average. You'll see the 268 million versus the 247 million when you compare the cap with the actual market assessed value. And that would represent approximately 8% difference between the two as, the difference that the cap is impacting on the assessment. So speaking about cap, and Shannon had spoke about it, and she had mentioned the 0.3% increase this past year. So when you compare that with your 5.35% market value increase, it's not unexpected that the cap kicked in on more properties, in that the cap value goes up a little, market value goes up quite a bit. The market exceeds the cap, and so the cap becomes eligible on many of the accounts. So just for your information purposes, the number of properties, residential properties in the town that were eligible for cap in 2020 was 63%. For 2021, that has increased to 79%. So once again, the difference between the cap assessment and the market value assessment fluctuates between the two. As far as that gap, you're probably maybe a little less than what the provincial average would be. Provincial average could be in the 8-10% range, somewhere there. You're sitting around 8%, 7.8%, something along that line. So I'll go to the next slide there, Shannon. So these numbers essentially reflect what I was speaking about just a moment ago. You'll see the all residential assessed value. That's the 5.35% increase on the right-hand top there. And that's the change from 20 to 21 in the town. If you sort of look at I guess the most important part to yourself as councillors when you're and staff, when you're setting budgets, it's the taxable residential, which is, sort of where that cap impact comes into. So residential with cap, as you can see, up 3% on the right-hand margin, halfway down there. And so once again, that's the, market sort of, it's tempered by the cap CPI increase of 0.3% last year. Commercial values across the province were typically flat to down a little to slightly negative. Last year in Lunenburg, we did a lot of work on the commercial portfolio the previous year, and commercial was up 4.62% last year on strong sales, and there's still continued, the market is still vibrant and is still relatively strong, but essentially after the increases last year, it was just kind of a, this year was a little more tempered. So there was a slight decrease in there, and no one thing in particular. It's just, various accounts across the board. Shannon, I think we can move on to the next one. So residential sales, as you can see, continue to trend upward in the town of Lunenburg. I don't think that's unexpected to any of us. We've all been reading about, the past year or so, with the COVID-19. But we're better than Lunenburg to relocate or to go really. Over the past 3 years, over 143 properties or over 140 properties have sold, which represents about 16% of the residential properties in the town itself. So that's pretty good, quite a strong turnover as far as the number of sales, how many residents have sold and that in the area, indicative of that. 5% were in 2020. That was the 50 plus sales for 2020. It's been 50, 45, somewhere in that range. Commercial sales remain strong, and 6 commercial sales in 2020. That may not sound like a whole lot. Over the past 3 years, they've been relatively strong. But in towns around Nova Scotia, 6 commercial sales is a good, strong indication of where values may be going, especially if we're permitted to look back, a year, 2 years in the past, and we can gather that data, and it'll show us trends as to where things are moving. So we expect that to continue. So, and not unexpectedly, the Montague Street and King Street corridors at downtown core are the places where a lot of the action's taken, a lot of development, a lot of things on the go there with the waterfront development project and those types of things as well. So, good, strong future. And, or it looks certainly all indications are that it's going to continue. And, I think, we might say that it's a seller's market still. It is in many areas of the province right now. But, once again, it's a great spot for people, very attractive, still a very affordable place to live, raise your family, or to be there for whatever reason. So I think it's a lot of it is, and you would know, of course, as counselors there, that I think a lot of it is those that are coming from outside the area, whether it be in other parts of Canada or internationally, or whether they're coming from local, just outside in other areas of Nova Scotia. So, and I think that's probably the last one, I believe, Shannon.
Thank you,
So I wanna
Paul.
thank you once again.
And so this is just our 1-800 number. Like I said, we are staffed. We have our own internal call center staff, and they can triage directly to an assessor. So if any property owners have an inquiry for us, we definitely encourage them to call and talk about their assessment. They don't have to wait till January. We'd rather talk to them now than have them have to call us in January if something could be discussed beforehand. And so that's all the slides that we have, and we have time for questions depending on what you have left on your agenda.
Thank you, Shannon and Paul. First off, I'm just wondering, can those slides be circulated to council after the meeting? I think it'd probably be very helpful for councilors to be able to dive into that. Thank you for that thorough presentation, and I will open it up to council for questions, if anybody has any. Councillor Halverson.
It's my standing first question, isn't it? Thanks again. That was a great presentation. I just was curious, I'm sure it doesn't, but you mentioned that HRM does account for about 50% of the overall assessment in the province. Does that skew assessment anyway to rural Nova Scotia?
What do you mean?
Well, I guess when we're seeing property values go up in Halifax, we're all, we're a neighboring county. Does that impact our assessment? When Halifax gets pulled up, does Lunenburg get pulled up with it? Or do you just focus on the geographic Lunenburg County lines?
Do you want me to take that one, Shannon, or you want to go with it?
I can start if you'd like. So we do produce statistics for each individual municipality. So we do look within your boundary lines, but it all depends on the sales. So if the sales in your area are telling us that we need to move assessments, then we will. We are seeing a lot of people choosing the ability to work from home is driving them out of the city and moving to other areas to be able to live and work in a different place. And so there is, I don't like calling it sprawl, but we are seeing movement outside of the city, and those other areas are starting to pop up. But the Halifax market and what's happening there, we don't compare that to what would be going on in the town of Lunenburg. It would be its own market. Paul, do you want to add on to that?
No, I think Shannon covered it pretty good. It's not really directly related. We slice and dice it such that it's neighborhoods and municipalities. So Lunenburg, town of Lunenburg is the town of Lunenburg. If Rod wants to jump in, I'll give him the opportunity to prove that he has that he's out there. But I think we've got 6 or 7 neighborhoods in the town of Lunenburg. Rod knows for sure. He does a reassessment for down this way. So anyways, and we look at them separately as to what sales happen in what neighborhoods. And how is that impacting those homogeneous, smaller neighborhoods as far as trending, and which way should the values be moving in those neighborhoods?
Great. No, that answers the question. Thanks very much.
Great.
Thank you. I have Councillor Sanford.
So thank you very much. I'm just interested to build further from what Paul is saying, in better understanding how what Paul just said fits into that mass appraisal process. Like I'm not quite clear on that.
Well, it can be very complex, I'll put it that way. But if we look at it from the higher level, it is essentially we look at the sales, we look at ratio factors on each of the sales, assessment value versus the actual market value sale. And we have statistical testing professionals, statisticians that go through the data. The assessors work with them. We look at trends, market values, what's happening, and by the time all the testing and all the analysis is done, we come up with where the value trends are within the international standards that we operate within.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions at this stage? All right, seeing none, thanks for coming in, and we'll look forward to getting that report as a follow-up.
Definitely. And we just want to close by saying, we want to thank Bea and Lisa. They're great to meet with, and quite frequently, I know Lisa and our assessor, I don't know if he was able to join us. I think he's out there, but Heather said she wasn't able to find him. They talk quite frequently, so we do appreciate the relationship that we have, and we look forward to seeing you again come December when we send the assessment roll.
Okay. Have a
Thanks
great summer.
You too.
Thank you, and stay safe, everyone.
Great.
Bye.
Thanks.
Okay, that takes us on to 7B, the Comprehensive Community Plan Annual Work Plan, Staff Report, and Draft Mo.
Thanks, Your Worship. Can you hear me? Okay, we've had some IT problems here this afternoon. Okay, thank you, Your Worship. So Heather's just bringing up the work plan that is part of your agenda package, Your Worship. Council will recall that at the March 23rd council meeting, a motion was approved requesting staff to prepare a 21-22 annual work plan, and in particular, setting out the CCP implementation schedule. Fundamental to the preparation of this document was the development of and approval of the town's annual budget, and that was approved on May 25th, as you'll recall. So in fairly short order, senior management staff have prepared this document, and Heather will next turn, if she would be so kind, to the table of contents on page 3. Because we thought it would be helpful to just pause on this page for a moment, Your Worship, just to outline the components of the overall document, because it is quite lengthy. It's obviously not Heather's intention nor mine to go through this in any great detail, but rather to provide an overview that's set out in this table of content. So in priority order, we will be summarizing the key priorities that are identified in this report for this first year of the Comprehensive Community Plan's implementation. And we'll also provide brief comment on the ongoing core services of the municipality, because there are many daily functions that are not fully captured in the Comprehensive Community Plan. Turning to the next page, wherein there is a message from Your Worship, it notes that the annual work plan provides, in effect, a roadmap for these many municipal priorities for the fiscal year that we're currently in, which ends March 31, 2022. And that many of the components of this plan are, of course, determined by Project Lunenburg's Comprehensive Community Plan. I wanted to pause for a moment and at the outset as well, Your Worship, to thank town's senior management team for their work in preparing this plan and many of the background documents that are interwoven in it, as you'll see through the appendices that we'll briefly mention. There was a lot of background work that is consolidated in this more precise plan. And in particular, I wanted to thank the Assistant Municipal Clerk, Heather McCollum, who will now take you through several of the next components of this plan. And I'll turn it over to Heather, Your Worship.
There, just got to unmute. Okay, so the next two pages, pages 4 and 5, are our executive summary, and they really, really do just kind of put all of the information that's in this entire document into these 2 pages. So This summarizes the project priorities for town council committees and staff in fiscal 21-22. And just a note too, as you're aware, our fiscal year runs from April 1st to March 31st. So the two halves of this are really the comprehensive community plan's 5-year plan action items, and number 2, the operational priorities by department. Although some of those operational or capital items were integrated into the CCP, as you saw in the budget. So, and then following this chart, there's a breakdown in a bit more detail. So for section A, the CCP 5-year plan, the point with this annual plan is that it's just that, it's annual, it's year 1 of 5. So there is work to be done across these priorities over the next number of fiscal years. So in this particular year 1, the biggest key pieces we have here are the municipal planning strategy, land use bylaw, and subdivision bylaw, which, as you know, are in its public participation process right now, and the Heritage Conservation District Plan and bylaw, which is probably it may bump into the next fiscal year before it's approved, but most of the work will be done this year. So under the CCP, under community structure, we have a study on sustainable energy, and we have a project to initiate some of the site planning for development, things like surveying and so on. Under housing, the largest piece is the planning documents as foundational pieces and to foster relationships with stakeholders. In servicing and facilities, upgrades to the water treatment plant and collection and discharge system are the top number 1 and 2. And a municipal facilities plan is in development, and many of the excuse me, capital maintenance projects from our day-to-day work have been housed under here as well. Mobility, improving connectivity between Old Town and New Town has integrated some of the active transportation planning work, such as trails and sidewalks. Economic development, continuing relationships with our surrounding communities and establishing a staff position. Under heritage and urban design, the item that connects to both of those in this fiscal year is working on our accessibility action plan. Environment and sustainability, again, we're looking at the possibility of programs for energy efficient retrofits. Under culture and recreation, and also under governance, the work of the Anti-Racism Special Committee spans a number of initiatives. And under governance, we have a number of items such as the developing a public participation strategy, an organizational review, and performance indicators. So there's those materials being done under the CCP, but we also have day-to-day operations for providing municipal services. So this page summarizes specific projects that are happening this year that might not be part of every other year. Some of them are ongoing, such as things like budget, accounting, and oversight, but then other items like IT systems upgrades are work that are in progress this year. So these summarize specific projects that are coming up right now. And I won't go through these because these will all be familiar to you from our from the capital budget and operations. And I'll just pass it back to Bea to talk a little bit.
Thanks very much, Heather. And turning, as Heather has now, to page 6 in the work plan, Council will recall that the current 5-year plan contains 35 primary action items, and they're based on 10 strategic directions. They are depicted there with the graphic icons. And I think what we'll do in the interest of time, Your Worship, because I know you have a very full agenda, is perhaps just look at the next page 7 of the document and provide a little bit of a recap for you or explanation of the key that appears there highlighted in yellow. You'll see this is the first strategic direction being community structure. And the chart below contains 5 core components to it. The first being the strategic direction goal. That's found within the primary document, the comprehensive community plan. Then the 5-year action items are identified well. Those are further found in the CCP. They are referenced with a number next to them as part of the weighting exercise that staff conducted as a component of the initial outline of Upland's consulting recommendation that these 35 items be prioritized through a weighting exercise. Next, there's identification of the municipal lead. And then we have the key stakeholders that are identified. Again, that was extracted from the original document prepared by Upland Consulting. And then the milestones that are first and foremost for this upcoming or current fiscal year. Those, as Heather mentioned, that are found in a heavier black font are the priority items that will be the focus of our work plan for this upcoming year. Heather, again, in the interest of time, I would suggest that we move ahead to page 17 of the document, because I think those other components, unless there's any questions council may have about the contents of them, are fairly straightforward. They're ambitious, but I think they're relatively straightforward. On page 17, we wanted to provide council with a summary as well of the essential core services that we provide. Some of this information is provided on our website already, but we thought it was a helpful summary of just sort of the day-to-day tasks from our duties at the cemetery, solid waste, our electric utility and water views. So they're recapped in those bar graphs there. And it's also noted that many of those services are provided within a regulatory framework, not only of the town's making through our own water utility regulations and electric utility regulations, but often in regards to senior government reporting and service standard requirements. So some of those tasks are quite onerous when it comes to reporting and compliance provisions, as council's well aware of. Heather, I'll turn it over to you to review page 18, the departmental responsibilities. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next couple of pages, many of this will look familiar to you because it was part of the information provided in your departmental overviews. They've just been condensed a little bit further here. And we've got some additional information next to it that just shows some of the budget figures that apply to these particular departments. In the case of corporate services, we've outlined what the property tax base is in the town. And then a listing here that just reviews, here are all the pieces that are under corporate services. Here are all the pieces that are under the electric utility, for example, which also has an outline of the customer base. Protective services, the fire department, and then all the other protective services, which include things like animal control, building and fire inspection, etc. Public works budget is split out into a number of different areas. And again, this summarizes the ongoing tasks that they have. So these charts are really more about the day-to-day responsibilities. Same for recreation, which we've also included estimated income from programs and rentals versus the budget. So it's you can easily see what the town support contributes to recreation, and the water utility again with the customer base and what their duties are. And with that, I will just turn it back to Bea to talk a little bit about implementation.
Good, thanks. Given the enormity of the work that's been involved with Project Lunenburg overall, obviously it's representative of at least 2 years worth of council and committee and staff members' work. We thought it would be interesting just to pause for a moment and reflect on the latest facet of the implementation of that plan and provide a graphic, which Heather very capably put together, as you see on page 21 of the plan, outlining, and these are only some of the key milestones that we've most recently achieved, really since mid-December 2020 and to the current day. So it provides an overview of the steps that have been taken by council and staff most recently to bring the CCP, or Comprehensive Community Plan, and its 5-year action plan items to life, and how the status of the work is being shared with the public. So originating back in November 17th, within just a week of council having been elected, approving the Project Lunenburg document as the community's new strategic plan, and setting out on the implementation components as we've set out on pages 21 and 22 of this report. I'll turn that over again to Heather to provide you with a summary of the public engagement, and then we'll just close out with some of the plans that we've provided in the appendices and see if council has any questions of us. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you, Bea. So this is just, again, a little bit of an overview on the various methods of updating council and the public on the status of town operations. So currently, the way we are able to do this is via council meetings, whether that's in person and live streamed, and the agenda and minutes packages are available. Committee of the whole, same. Public information meetings and public hearings, similar to what has been going on quite a lot in the past month about the planning documents. The mayor's monthly update always includes a little piece on what's happening with Project Lunenburg. Periodic updates, as they're relevant, are shared on the website and social media. And just to note too, that one of the action items for this year is actually to develop a more comprehensive public participation strategy. So that will be taking place during this calendar year, or fiscal year, I should say.
Great. And on page 24 of the report or plan, you'll find an illustration that helps to put all of this good work into context of the fuller operational work that council, staff, and the community at large are working alongside the CCP. As you know, staff are also developing, assessing, and executing a number of the plans that are shown on this page, the front page covers of them. Some of them will quite handily fit within the CCP. There's components of accessibility, active transportation, climate change, issues of solid waste management, and planning, of course, being a central component of that work, and heritage regulation. As well, more recently, we're looking at the county-wide development of Lunenburg's accessibility plan, and more recently, an anti-racism municipal action plan that is going to be undertaken in very short order. Heather will do a quick review of the appendices that we've included for reference, because we thought it would be helpful to have a central gathering point for a lot of the background documents for ease of reference. And then we'll close out, and if council has any questions, we'd be more than pleased to answer them. Over to you, Heather.
Thank you. There is a link provided in the document to the budget, because obviously the items in the budget really tie very tightly to this plan. The other documents we've provided here, there's just an organization chart by role, so we kind of understand where all of our staff live. The town committee structure that just shows internal, external, and external organizations. And then the other two documents attached here, one of them is the 35 actions ranking spreadsheet that was prepared by finance as they were creating the rankings. So it shows the weighted rankings. So we saw this initially back in December. So let me just flip through this quickly. And then we have all 35 of the Gantt charts for the 35 action items, just as a reference. These were created back in February. So these individual documents are really the work plans for each individual action item. So if anybody wants to go into the weeds, it's all there for you to look at. And of course, these documents get updated because these are the working documents of the staff. And these have all, quite a few of them have probably changed since you initially got them. And I think that is everything.
Great.
Thank you for that thorough presentation. I see that Councillor Sanford has had her hand up for a while, so I will turn the floor to her.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say what an amazing report, and I really recognize the amount of work that's gone into this report. So good on all of you for being able to put that together. It's very comprehensive. I really like the different charts, the way the information's laid out, how it flows, the use of color, love color. But anyhow, it just makes for, it keeps you engaged as you're going through the document. I was wondering in section A, I realize it's mapped out so that it's reflecting the specific pieces out of the plan, but I'm wondering if there's something we could do to strengthen the housing. There's one statement there in the context of housing. And what I understand because of my involvement, you know, we list our 3 documents at the top of that chart in section A, and I understand the implications that those documents have on housing. And as we go forward, you can see the focus that is on housing, but it's just not reflected in that section A part. It's very weak. And I know all of our focus on housing, I believe, is very strong. So it just doesn't come through in that section A. And then the other thing I noted was in section B on page, I think it's B on page 17. Love those columns with the, you know, the colors, and then it has, starts with corporate services. In corporate services, we list planning and development, but that's the first time we see it. So I go back to section A, I think it is, or I don't know whether it's A or B, where the operational priorities are listed. It doesn't list planning and development capacity there. And I'm wondering if there's something that we may want to put in there that reflects we're building capacity around planning and development, because as you go down further through and all the information you provide, as soon as you hit that red column of corporate services, you do see planning and development, and you see it all through the document thereafter. You just aren't seeing it the front side. So because they're public documents, I think it would be good for the public to understand we do have a heavy interest in housing, and we do have a heavy interest in planning and development and the capacity that goes along with that. So those are just 2 observations I made reading it, just, you know, being new to the report, but I really like the report.
Thank you, Councillor Sanford. That's all your questions?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Halverson.
Put my hand down, but unmute my mic. I would like to echo the mayor's sentiment as well as Councillor Sanford. I think a fantastic report, very comprehensive. Really appreciate this. It's very easy to follow along and see what's happening here. I had one little piece I'd like to address in protective services. I noticed when we get into again, as Councillor Sanford pointed out, there's pieces that are displayed in some points of the presentation, but not others. Page 17, protective services lists RCMP policing along with, you know, animal control building, et cetera. When we jump down to page 19 and we look at protective services, we see the budget operating for fire 698 and then other 958 100. Part of that other is the RCMP, which, if memory serves, is about $800,000, which is the majority of the protective services budget. And I kind of think that probably should be highlighted a little stronger than it is. But aside from that, again, great report. I would like to see that laid out more clearly for the public, as Councillor Sanford pointed out.
Okay, well, there there is a draft motion. And we can approve it with staff to take those minor non-substantive edits under consideration. Is anybody willing to move the draft motion? Moved by Councillor Sanford, seconded by Councillor Halverson. Is there any discussion or debate? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried unanimously. And I'm sure we look forward to not having to build the template again next year, just having to fill it in. Thank you, Bea and Heather. That takes us on to the item C, 7C, the South Shore Library's request to use the Library Academy room on a permanent basis. And I would look to council, there's a draft motion there to refer. I would look to council to see if there's a recommendation or if councilors want to weigh in. Deputy
Turn your video off and turn your mic.
Yeah, no, sorry about that. I got all kinds of, I hit the wrong button there. The in-camera meeting was coming up and I couldn't see the other buttons. And
You need to get a new clicker.
I need a new clicker. I need a bigger screen. With regards to the library, I mean, it does suggest there that, you know, we send this to the committee of the whole, have a staff report, you know, blah, blah, blah. I would be okay if we just simply honored the original motion by Carnavelli and Risser for the occasional overflow requirements subject to availability. And I would suggest that, you know, the library don't overextend their privilege in the, you know, the very real possibility that this room could be leased at some time in the future.
Councillor Halverson.
I would like to concur with the deputy mayor.
I'm seeing a lot of other shaking heads. Can we assume that that is the consensus of council? Okay. B, is a motion required, or we would just not need a motion because the original granting of the original request would stand?
It can technically. I think it would be helpful, though, to reaffirm or reiterate that position, that you have examined it, you've closed it out with this motion, and then we can convey that to the library officials. Okay,
so we will entertain a motion then that the original library, the original granting of the library request for occasional use, subject to potential lease, be extended, but that that is all, and that the room could potentially still be leased. And I'm sure B will have language for the minutes on that. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Moved by the deputy mayor, seconded by Councillor Sanford. Any discussion or debate? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. All right, that just takes us on to item D, the draft amendments to the deed transfer tax bylaw, which, as councilors will recall, stem from some of the budget decisions. There is a staff report, but I look to councilors. I think we're all familiar with this at this stage. So there is a draft motion provided, and we will see if anybody would like to move that motion as presented. Moved by Councillor Sanford, seconded by Councillor Halverson. Is there any discussion or debate? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. That takes us on to the committee meeting minutes. So there's a deferred recommendation from the Planning Advisory Committee for June 22nd. So we'll leave it for that meeting, correct, Bea?
Yes, Your Worship.
Thank you. And then there are meeting minutes for a series of meetings that occurred, as well as the June 1st meeting minutes for the Committee of the Whole, at which the grants were decided and recommended to council. And there's a draft recommendation there and I will let the deputy mayor, if he would be so kind, move that.
I would so move, Your Worship, yes.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Birtles was quickest on the draw. Is there any discussion or debate? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. That takes us on to new business. We have one item of new business, and it is a celebration looking to how to celebrate Pride 2021. There is a staff report provided, and I will provide 5 minutes for staff to summarize that report.
Thank you, Your Worship. Sorry, I realized I didn't turn on my video last time. Okay, so Rainbow Crosswalk. This is actually an update to a motion that was passed by the previous council. So they passed at the council meeting of October 13th. They passed a motion to paint the crosswalks at the intersection of King and Lincoln Street as part of Pride this year, as we've seen in other municipalities. What transpired since then is we've realized that the Provincial Department of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal has no guidelines for this kind of an installation. So they only have just white, and the Transportation Association of Canada does have a project on the books to re-look at this, but that will take about 18 months and it hasn't started yet. So what this report is really about is what do we do if we cannot, as our public works staff are not comfortable with installing a crosswalk outside of the provincial regulations. So there's a number of other solutions that different municipalities and schools have used in lieu of a crosswalk. And I've got a couple of pictures of them here. This one is in front of Blue Nose Academy. This one is at the Acadian School in the area. So, and of course there are...
Sorry, Heather, you're not sharing your screen, so councilors can't
I'm
see you.
sorry. Oh my goodness. Whoops. There we go. Can we see? Okay. So yes, Blue Nose Academy is here, and the Acadian School is here, and there's a number of other municipalities that have done something similar. Bridgewater has put in something like this. We're seeing items like this. I saw one like this in front of Parkview this afternoon. Some municipalities have gone ahead to develop their own guidelines to use crosswalks, but such as HRM and others, but we're not suggesting that we oppose the Public Works recommendation. But there are a number of alternate locations that that we looked at. So there's a sidewalk could be done in the block of King and Lincoln Street, where the installation of a sidewalk was intended to go. It could be the parks on either side of Town Hall. There could be the vertical face of the large ramp between Blue Nose Drive and Montague Street. The Fisheries Museum would not entertain painting the wooden boardwalk, but they'd be quite open to something on the asphalt. The accessible walkway at the back door of Town Hall and the entrance to the Lincoln Street parking lot. So there's a number of good opportunities here. The other option I wanted to flag as well is that the painting can be done by Public Works staff, or if members of council preferred to make a bit of an event out of it, they could contribute to the painting, or we could solicit some volunteers to do so. The scheduling here is just because there's a lot of dates for Pride. So as many of you I'm sure are aware, Pride Month generally internationally is in June. So a number of places have already put in their crosswalks or flag raisings and all that sort of thing. In Nova Scotia, Pride has generally been in about the third week of July, but this year it's been moved to the middle of August, I guess in hopes that some gatherings may be able to take place by then. And because the Pride flag raising is something that we do alongside Pride Lunenburg County, they have chosen to do the flag raising in August. But I've already actually had a question or two about the Pride flag or a crosswalk in recent days. So if we could get something installed this month, that would be ideal. The financial impact is really negligible. It would be included in the paint budget. So our recommendation is basically that a walkway be installed. It's just a question of where and whether it would just be done by staff or whether council would like to be involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. So I'll open the floor to councilors. Councilor Ernst.
Thank you. I'm having the same trouble here with the things on the screen. Just one question regarding locations. They all sound like excellent spots. One thing that sort of sticks out is where there is a lot of filming going on in Lunenburg at the particular time, probably will be for much of the summer. Are any of those places potentially going to be spots where there will be film? Because I would hate to see this painted and then only have to be undone or repainted for the sake of that.
Hadn't actually considered that. We can certainly discuss that with their location manager and see if any of these would be in the way.
Okay, Councilor, does that answer your question, Councilor? Councilor Bertels?
He answered my question.
Councilor Sanford?
No question, just a comment. I would love to see the faces of the steps going up from Blue Nose Drive to Montague Street painted by the councilors.
I call blue.
Thank you. I want yellow or red.
I want green.
This might not be a problem. Councilor Duggan?
So on this, along the same lines, I would love to see it outside of Town Hall on the stairs coming up. If you're facing Town Hall, the left-hand side, are those cement stairs though? They're wooden now that I'm thinking about it. So it'd have to be the stairs on the other side, I think. It's just a really central spot where people are often walking up and down and highly visible, and would love to be a part of the painting if possible. So
Thanks. If people with old hands could just put them down, just so I can, because there's a lot up. So I have Councilor Halverson, the Deputy Mayor, and then Councilor Ernst I saw with a hand raised.
Calling me first. Okay. I agree with Councilor Duggan. I think it should be a central location. I like Councilor Sanford's suggestion that council are the people doing this. I'm very happy to contribute some time to do that. But I feel like the walkway between Blue Nose and Montague isn't high visibility enough. I think it's a nice location, but I don't think enough people see it. I think putting it closer to Town Hall, near King Street, it's the center of town, it's the center of commerce. Everyone comes in to check their mail. I would move that either it be some area of King Street itself or Town Hall as has been suggested.
All right, I have the Deputy Mayor and then Councilor Ernst.
Thanks, Your Worship. Yes, I know from last council originally, it was going to be a council participation thing. So I think that's great. I think we should all participate. And I think it works out good that we each get a color. I think that's kind of neat too. I don't care what color I have, so that's okay. And I think also it should be, I mean, we can't hide it away. It should be in a visible place and somewhere that, it can be viewed easily, like a busy area, as Councilor Halverson mentioned.
Councilor Ernst, then myself, then Councilor Bertels.
I really just wanted to echo Councillor Duggan's point, which has been brought up several times. I'm thinking personally the roadway, what would be on the right side of Town Hall. That area is already set aside as a commemorative space with the cenotaph, with the UNESCO monument, with town official flags, etc. So I think keeping it all in there to commemorate this seems like a great idea. And Your Worship already called blue, so I'm out of line there, but just let me know what color I'm going to have so I can dress with accordingly colors, so when I get it all over me, it won't be as bad.
I just I'm not opposed to anything anybody said, but I just want to raise a thought about the mindfulness of the somberness of the war memorials or the firefighters memorials that we have in those areas. And I think we might want to reflect on how those juxtaposition together. Councilor Bertels.
Thanks. I was just going to echo with Councilor Harrison. I think it needs to be in a high traffic area so people can see it. And I wanted to call color green.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is unfortunate we can't do it on the, we had intended originally to do the 4 sidewalks in that public square on King. Councilor Halverson.
Yeah, I just first off want to assure Councilor Ernst, I don't think he'll need to apply it with his shirt. So we'll provide brushes, rollers. But to your point, Your Worship, about the somber nature of the monuments, I would submit that the struggle for pride and for recognition is as somber as any other struggle. So I think it's completely appropriate to put it alongside the monuments.
That's a very fair point.
Here, here.
Yeah, they did it for freedom, so that's a good point.
No, and I certainly wasn't meaning to diminish any struggle in my commentary. So is that then the location that's preferred by council? Would we then go up both risers potentially? I would think on either side of the War Memorial, in between the War Memorial and the bandstand. Is that what people are thinking?
Your Worship, I can pull up a photo of the area just so we have it in front of us if we like.
I was just wondering if it's the right amount of steps.
I actually wouldn't even think the steps. We could do it on the walkway.
Yeah.
I can't see from here. I was gonna look, but
Just gonna hang your phone at the window.
Your Worship, I can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There'd be 5 risers.
Yeah, so I think maybe Heather, I'm just wondering how much time, do we have time for just to defer this till June 22nd to finalize a decision? And I think the walkways would be more appropriate, because then the number of steps isn't really a consideration, and it actually could be quite a lot more sizable.
Sorry, just wasn't sure I was unmuted. Absolutely. It would be nice to get this done within the month of June if we can, but it's completely up to yourselves.
Well, I mean, we can go ahead tonight. There's no issue with doing that. I just wanted to make sure the locations were assessed adequately.
could we not just say that the location will be somewhere in that vicinity? Do we need to specify whether it would be the stairs or the sidewalk leading up?
Deputy Mayor?
I just think, well, maybe staff could have that vetted out for us and have it ready and have it marked, so we'll see if we could paint between the lines or not. So, you know, they could have it prepped for us, and then it won't take very long to do it.
All right, so is anybody willing to make a motion on this vis-a-vis a location? Councillor Duggan? Sorry, and the location isn't specified in the draft motion, so whoever's the mover should specify.
What would you like me to specify? Because we haven't decided on a location, so just outside of town hall, is that?
Well, and this is sort of why I was wondering if it could be deferred until the 22nd so that staff could put together sort of an outline of a proposal.
I was thinking along, like, if it's on the walkway, well, then it would be fairly simple, and that's why I'm thinking staff could have that prepped for us and ready to go, and then we just have to, among the 7 of us, have to figure out a day we can get together and do it.
Okay, so then we can take that as a motion from the deputy mayor that it would be, yes, those walkways, all 7 colors, staff can scope out, you know, size and whatnot. And on both, it would look silly, I think, to do it asymmetrically. So I would think on both sides. Is there
Sorry,
a seconder for that motion?
just, I want to clarify what you're asking there, Your Worship.
Mhm.
So you were talking both walkways?
Well, I would think, I mean,
I
it's just-
see Heather sharing her screen here, so we've got. I just want to be clear, I'm happy to do both, of course, so.
And Your Worship, I was just referring to the risers at the top where it meets Townsend Street. So if you were referring to the lower one that Heather has depicted on the screen, that well, we just have to count those numbers.
no, I wasn't referring to the stairs at all. I was referring to the pavement in between Townsend and Lincoln, and Cumberland, rather.
Your Worship, it was just, and just advice to staff when they're doing that. I'm not sure the entire walkway would be done, because it would be so wide, you wouldn't even, I don't think you would appreciate, what the symbol is there. You'd really, I think if they could just condense it a little bit, like a section, that would look appropriate, would look really good, down towards the lower end where it's very visible. Yeah.
You can make long parallel lines from one end of the walkway to the other.
That's a lot of paint. But what about where you've got indicated right now? Heather, I see from perhaps the crosswalk up to maybe just the walkway, or maybe up to in the photo, the two women are walking. I don't know. What's council's pleasure there? I don't know.
That's what I was kind of thinking too, like up to that first break there. Yeah,
Yep.
From the
I agree.
sidewalk down to the sidewalk. Yeah.
Well, I'm kind of thinking something like each color could be in a block that runs the entire width of the walkway and maybe 1 foot or so in depth, I guess, whatever it be. And then just fill it in until we've got them all.
I think we're running the risk of drifting into design by committee here.
Yeah.
So if we've decided that that's the location, which is a great location, then I think we can leave it to staff to sort out the details. I did have a seconder from Councillor Duggan, and just noticed that Councillor Sanford has dropped off the call. She had a previous engagement that she's had to go to from 7:20 to 8 o'clock. So just noting that for members. That's not a technical difficulty. It has been moved and seconded that rainbow crosswalks or rainbow in paint installations be put at that location. Is there any discussion or debate? Nope. Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. All right. That takes us on to meeting in camera. So I need a motion that it's moved and seconded to meet in camera pursuant to the relevant items listed there under section 22(2) of the Municipal Government Act, moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Birtles. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. We will move in camera and take a 10-minute recess. So reconvene at about 7:30 in camera.